What is up, Bitcoin miners? Welcome to another episode of the Buildamine podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Bello, and today I have a very anticipated episode for you guys. I've been talking with Nico for past couple months. I first came across him through an article that he had written on GitHub. I found it on Fog Hashing, but we're going to use the GitHub article because today it's just, we're going to use that one just because that's what he wants to use. That's actually the one that he wrote, and we're not going to share anything that he didn't write. So, man, I'm just so excited about this. It's been, I want to say 3 or 4 months in the making since, I started talking with Nico and just getting him on board with coming on the podcast. But the reason we're talking to Nico is because Nico built a hydronic integrated heat system. And if you don't know what hydronic integrated heat system means, it's basically a fluid system. So his home is about 100 years old, and it basically heats his house with an electric boiler that heats up water and sends it through his house. He's going to get into it. He's going to talk deeper onto the subject, and we're going to really understand how this works and why it works. And it's going to be really freaking cool. So most of you have been following me for a while. And if you haven't, I'm Trevor. I am a pleb miner. I just started mining back in January. I actually started mining on this S9 right here, using the heat to heat my home. And I basically only use mining to heat my house. And so Nico is a great guest to have on this show because he actually built the system, and he did it with his bare hands, with no experience, just threw it at it and just decided, I'm going to build this. And he's a testament to what can be done with hard work and dedication. So we're going to bring him on. But before we do that, I have something to share with you guys.
Welcome to the Mastermind Club, your ultimate gateway into the world of Bitcoin mining. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale your operations, our vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts is here to support you every step of the way. Join us for weekly sessions led by industry pros, where you'll exchange ideas, brainstorm strategies, and stay motivated on your mining journey. From heat management to site optimization, our monthly deep dives cover the technical know-how you need to succeed. And with access to our entire back catalog, you'll never miss a beat. But that's not all. Our members enjoy exclusive one-on-one sessions with veteran miners, plus direct access to special pre-sales and insider opportunities at Bitcoin Mining World. Ready to take your mining to the next level? Join the Mastermind Club today and secure your spot in the future of Bitcoin mining. Visit bitcoinminingworld.com or scan the QR code now. And now back to the show.
What did you guys think of that? That was the first real ad we had on the show for the Mastermind Club. I think that was incredible. Huge shout out to John at MKE Video for putting that together for us. I think that was spot on, beautiful, and it really captures what the Mastermind Club is about. But enough about the Mastermind Club. We're going to talk about mining and heat reuse today. And so we're going to bring up Nico. Nico, welcome to the Buildamine podcast, brother. I appreciate you being here today. It's been a work in progress getting you here. We had a couple of different things, getting our way the last few times, but we're finally here, and I'm excited to talk to you. How are you doing today, man?
Great, man. Great to be here. Really excited. I know, just like you said, we've been trying to get this scheduled for a while, but this is actually a continuation. I mean, we met at Nashville, and here we are.
Yeah, we did meet at Nashville, and that was really fun. We actually got to talk about your system there. We kind of recorded a little 5-minute snippet there, but today we're really going to dive headfirst into what you built, why you built it, and how. But before we do that, I always like to talk a little bit about the Bitcoin origin story. I know it's a little cliche, but it's something that's fun for me. So before we dive into your hydronic heat system, give us a little bit about your history, how you got into Bitcoin, and why you were drawn to it.
Sure, yeah. So my Bitcoin origin story would probably start back in around 2013 or 14. I remember hearing about Bitcoin probably on Reddit. And the idea of it like again, I was a teenager, so I didn't really know much about the technicals. I didn't really understand, the big monetary policies and all that stuff. Um, but something about it kind of stuck in my head, and it really kind of captivated me. And then in 2014, I got my first Bitcoin miner. I actually have it right here. So this is a little Antminer U2. It's one of the first USB miners.
Will you put that up to the camera so people
Yeah,
can
yeah,
see it a
yeah.
little better?
Yeah, so it's one of the early ASIC chips just on a USB drive, and this is what I used to mine, over 10 years ago now. Now, I never really got too much with this. I mean, this did, I think it was like 2 gigahashes, and then, now we're speaking in terahashes. So
Yeah.
even back then, this was like a little bit outdated, but as far as like a learning experience, it really got me hooked. Um, and then as I got older, I was watching Bitcoin price. I was too young to actually really do anything. And also, like, there weren't many resources back then. Like what we have now is crazy. Like we have so many documentation, we have all these podcasts, we have anything online about Bitcoin. Like this now exists, and 10 years ago it just didn't. But I was still into the idea. I liked, the decentralized currency thing. And then as I got, older, I went to college and stuff. I started studying computer science, and that really helped me grasp a little bit more of the technicals of Bitcoin, so I could actually understand, what it's doing. And if I'm gonna be into this thing, I got to at least understand it, with uh, at least understand that aspect of it. But that was around during like the block wars time. I'm sure you're familiar with that, right, Trevor?
I'm definitely familiar.
Yeah.
Most of my audience knows that I came into Bitcoin a little later than a lot of other people. So I came into Bitcoin around 2021.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I'm familiar with the block wars, and our audience is kind of familiar with the block wars. But if you want to explain it a little
Sure.
bit, we can do it.
Yeah. It was really weird time in Bitcoin's history. Basically, there was this other group. They, I'm not gonna. I'm probably gonna mess up some of these details, but the short end of it is that there were two groups of Bitcoiners. One wanted to increase the block size to help with scaling. One group did not. They wanted to implement something called SegWit, which reduced transaction size to fit more in a block. Um, Eventually, the chain forked in 2017, and there was Bitcoin Cash, and then there was Bitcoin. And I mean, I hate to admit it to the audience, but I mean, it's true. I at the time I didn't know any better. I was on the Bitcoin Cash side because I naively thought like, oh, the block size is full. Let's just increase the block size, and there's nothing bad that can happen from that, and transactions get cheaper. Uh, so I was on that train for a bit, and I also did a bunch of other like shitcoinery stuff in like 2017 through 2019. Eventually, I lost all of the original Bitcoin I had in some dumb trade because back then, like the Bitcoin fees. I mean, we've seen some high fee environments now, but back then, and right before that, it was they were quite high. So I was like, oh, this is dumb. Like nobody's going to use this. Doesn't make sense. You can't send small payments. So yeah, I really got into like the shitcoinery, and then I got burned, lost everything, even whatever this thing made. And then back in like 2020, 2021, I had a buddy gift me the Bitcoin Standard book. He read it. Somebody, I can't remember. Yep, is that the Bitcoin Standard?
That's
Yeah,
the
it
one,
is.
man.
Yep.
That's the one.
So he bought a bunch of them and gifted them to like all his friends and family. And to this day, he still tells me that I'm the only one that actually read it. And not only did I read it, but I mean, it really filled in all the blanks because I just love like monetary history. I feel like
Yeah.
everything that we've had in the past 40 to 80 years has been an anomaly, and a lot of the tension that young people face, especially, can really be traced back to monetary policy.
100%.
So the intersection between that and Bitcoin and the tech and mining, and like, there's just so many things in the Bitcoin space to learn about, and like the one word Bitcoin has so many different silos of knowledge that I don't know if it's a hot take, but I truly don't believe there's one person that is an expert in all of them. I mean, you can be really good at a bunch of them, but one person that has deep knowledge in every aspect of it, I think no way. But
no, it's one of those things. I like to think of it as like an ecosystem. Bitcoin is an ecosystem that is kind of growing. The bubble's getting bigger, and for you to know every single thing about Bitcoin, like every single aspect, touch point, facet of it, is like you'd have to live for thousands of years reading it every single day, and even then, you can't know everything. It's just impossible. I want to just kind of go back a little bit.
Sure,
talking about the block size wars. Nico was on the side of increasing the block size. For those of you who don't know why we don't want an increased block size, it's because the nodes have to, and I'm going to not explain this perfectly, but nodes are needed in order to verify transactions and verify the blockchain. In order to do that, you have to be able to download the blockchain, the entire history onto your node. And the bigger blocks means that there's more data that's required to download that blockchain. And so basically the idea is if you increase the block size, you're increasing the hardware that is needed in order to do that, and that's not something that we very much want. So I just wanted to, that was something that I had thought about. I wanted to kind of explain to our audience why a bigger block size is not generally, we don't want a bigger block size. We want to be able to keep the block size, or the block size low, so that miners and node runners can run the nodes and do it cheaply. We need cheap node operations. So
yeah,
sorry,
that's a good tangent, because like the cheap node operation really helps with decentralization. It helps with mining, because like you don't need as much bandwidth to send these blocks and the block templates like over. But yeah, in engineering, there's never a silver bullet. Everything is just trade-offs, and it's which trade-offs do you want to make. And like you can increase the block size, but your trade-off is decentralization. And
100%.
Right now, like, I mean, maybe in the future, I don't want to like have this opinion pinned to me, but like storage has just rapidly decreased in the past decade. And even since like the block size wars has rapidly decreased. So, I mean, who knows, maybe at some point it gets increased, or maybe people get, there's some sort of compression technique or encryption that makes each transaction smaller, kind of like we have with Taproot. Who knows? I mean, it's really hard to see where this is going to go, but I'm really glad that I was wrong about the block size wars, because decentralization needed to win. And, like now with an understanding, it's like, oh yeah, duh, you have to do that.
I think it's interesting because you talk about how like you were on one side of it and you were playing with the shit coins and stuff like that. Everybody who's an honest Bitcoiner, like if you're really honest with yourself and with the group and the ecosystem and the community, like you've got your shitcoin story. Everybody has had opinions that weren't theirs, and it's until you start like learning about it, educating yourself, and reading the Bitcoin Standard, reading Check Your Financial Privilege, like doing the research and understanding why decentralization is important, why we need this technology to secure our value, and all these different things. It's not until you go through that journey that you start realizing, oh shit, like I was in that phase, like I didn't know, I didn't understand, and now you're here. We forgive you. It's okay. You're on the right side of history now. Like we've all been there, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Just glad to be on the right path now.
Absolutely. So you got into Bitcoin back in 2011, 2013 time. You started mining on the little USB miner. You played with some shit coins. You lost your Bitcoin that you mined. You were on the big blocker side, but now you've come back. So tell us what your journey has been, since that time.
Yeah, I mean, post, I guess I'll talk about it as post Bitcoin Standard, just when everything finally like clicked.
I like it.
I've mainly just been stacking as much as I can, and really, it's turned into mining now. Like I had the trifecta of resource. It was more trifecta of like, man, I'm really fumbling this, but the ability, the know-how, and like the capital to build a system inside of this place. And it really just seemed like the best idea. Hold on.
You're good. You're good. Reset yourself.
Kind of yeah. What was the question again? I'm so sorry, Joe.
So I wanted to like kind of hear your journey. So the block size wars 2017. You read the Bitcoin Standard, and it kind of resets you and sends you down the path of like decentralization is key, mining is important. So what has that journey been like from 2017 to 2024? We've got about 6-7 years in that time. So you've had quite a bit of time to like educate yourself, learn about it. So what has that journey been like?
Yeah, so a lot of that time was, I would say it's pretty quiet, pretty boring. So after I got burned, I was like, oh man, all this stuff is so stupid. There's no utility here. That we don't need tokens for all this stuff. I'm just going to completely disconnect from all this. And then it wasn't until after reading, I was like, okay, this is the one, and there can only be one. There's only one Immaculate Conception with sound decentralized money. And then, I mean, I hate to say it's still pretty boring, but just kind of mining at the fiat job and stacking sats up until the mining project. So that was really when I got way more hands-on with it. I mean, I was doing like little things, like I was running a node, and to all the viewers, I would really suggest running a node if you can. It really helps out the
Oh yeah.
network. But I'd say all the exciting stuff pretty much happened when I decided to do the mining project.
Look, guys, at the end of the day, mining Bitcoin, it's not as exciting as you would like it to be. But here's the thing. The excitement brings volatility, and volatility means you have the opportunity to lose all of your shit, you know? So while it's boring, like, I mean, it is boring, but it's also not boring because you get to learn about all these cool things, and we're going to dive into it here in a second. But like, being boring is okay. Like, it's okay to just like live your life, because now we finally have a financial technology that allows us to store our value, project it into the future, so you can just sit on your hands and not do anything other than work your normal job, put all of your excess resources into Bitcoin and just stay there, you know? Like,
Yeah.
we finally have the ability to do that. This isn't like the, you know, era between 1970s and, you know, 2008 that you had to basically like invest your money in these crazy stocks and bonds and all these things just to, you know, go faster than you're currently going in order to stay in one place. I think I fucked up that analogy, but
No,
either
it's
way,
fine.
you know
I mean,
what I mean.
we have a savings technology now, and it's not an investment. Like, but like you were completely correct. Where before, like, let's say before we went off the gold standard, you could have a house, you could have your normal job, incomes match the housing prices and things. You could save money in the bank, and you get a decent, you know, return on that until we disconnected, and then now you have to do a lot more speculation. You know, houses, stocks. People just take more risk, and now we finally have a savings technology. So the saying "stay humble, stack sats," that, like, as boring as it is, like, it's supposed to be boring because like you're just doing what you need to.
Bitcoin is boring, you know. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, I mean, unless you're like us, I think I can speak for you and say that, you know, we're kind of psychopaths in the aspect that we're like super into this, and we're like, oh, Bitcoin this, it fixes everything. Not
Hmm.
really, but you know what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day, like, it is boring because Bitcoin is a simple, like, stupid system. Like, it's
Hmm.
stupid. It doesn't do very much. It only does like these certain things, but it's supposed to be that way so that we have the ability to save and to prosper, you know? Like, it doesn't need to be super complicated.
It's money as you thought money was when you were like a kid. Like, I remember there was like
Exactly.
that moment when I was like, you know, young kid, and then turning into like a teenager, when inflation finally like clicks, and you're like, wait, this is stupid. If I save my money and I don't do anything with it, I can buy less things each year. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's the worst end of the deal. So
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
just money how you think money works. And yeah, like, boring is stability in that sense.
Exactly. And you
Yeah.
know, like, I think about that a lot. I had a conversation with my mom the other day. Well, she's not really my mom, but she's like my mom. But you
Mm.
know, whatever. I had a conversation with her the other day, and it was like she's like, I just don't understand why so many people are so like beaten down and like they don't have hope for the future. And I'm like, Mom, it's because they don't have the ability to project their value into the future. They look towards their future and they're like, I'm never going to be able to retire. I'm never going to be able to buy a house. I'm never going to be able to afford to have a family. And you compound that with like working 40, 50, 60 hours a week just to barely pay your rent and buy food. It's like, what are we doing? And so people have lost hope. But once you flip over to that Bitcoin standard, or the idea of a Bitcoin standard, it's like, oh shit, like, I can just sit here and save my time, my value and my time in a savings technology that can't be stolen from me. And there's a possibility that I could actually retire at 45. I don't have to work my entire life. Like, there is that switch that happens, and that's when people really like get into Bitcoin and really understand it and realize that it doesn't have to be super volatile. Like, getting into stocks, you don't have to read these 10Ks and for like these reports, and you don't have to do all that. Like, I went down that road. Now I'm here. I don't fuck with stocks. I don't fuck with the stock market and the bonds and any of that. I just buy Bitcoin. I work my ass off, and someday life will be better. It's already gotten
Mhm.
better. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, my life has gotten so much better in the last 3 years. And it's because of my education in Bitcoin, my savings in Bitcoin, my learning about Bitcoin and mining and how it can make my life better.
I'd say mine's definitely gotten much calmer because you don't have to do all this research or whatever. You don't have to constantly play like the real estate game, because before Bitcoin, real estate was really the only other similar thing, and now all these homes have such like a speculative value on top of the utility value. It just doesn't make sense. But 40 years ago, you could totally buy a house on your one income, and that house grew with inflation. And then the people who did that are now looking at people that are our age, and they're like, "What's wrong with you kids?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
even with like investing, like nobody's reading, PE ratio, like nobody's reading info about the stocks or anything. And everything is just passive now. Like you have mutual funds, you have ETFs. Most people just buy the S&P and they're happy with their 6 to 8% return a year. But little do they know that that 6 to 8% a year isn't, adjusted for inflation. So
They're still losing.
yeah, they're either still losing, or if they're not, they're coming out at like what, 1 or 2% ahead. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. And it really is a tragedy because you're stealing from the future generations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I wish that the people who were doing this to us, because there is a set of people, and I don't want to call them the elite. I don't want to call them all that stuff. We'll just leave that out of here. But there is a type of person that is doing this to us. And I wish they had that forward thinking mind to like think, oh, I'm stealing from my grandkids. I'm stealing from my children's children's children. And like this isn't sustainable. We've seen how this can ruin people. Like go to a different country that's running on the dollar, but like, or that has a currency that's pegged to the dollar, and look at their way of life. You know what I mean? Like they're going backwards at a rate that is absolutely insane. And you think to yourself, like, this is not sustainable. But America is just, 2 degrees ahead of that.
Yeah,
So
and we have the privilege of being able to export our debt and force all these other countries to buy it.
yeah. Yeah.
That's not you're right. Like it's not gonna last forever.
No, I'm reading Check Your Financial Privilege right now from by um forgetting the name of the guy who wrote it, but it's a great book, and it talks a lot about this. It talks about the financial system in West Africa, and how it's connected to the franc, and all these things. And it's like, dude, we think it sucks here.
Mhm.
Go to Chad, go to West Africa, go to Indonesia, go to these places where their currency is pegged to something like the euro dollar or the dollar, and you'll learn very quickly that while it sucks here, it's 100 times worse there. And that's why we need Bitcoin. So enough about the currency and the financial situation. Let's get into mining. I really want to talk about this. I want to learn some more about you. So you built a hydronic fluid integrated heat system in your house.
Mhm.
And this is a system, the hydronic system is a system that's been around for a very long time. I don't know the history on it, but it's been around a long time. And all you did was just integrate a immersion Bitcoin mining system. So let's just kind of explain like why you decided that this was a good idea, and kind of the first steps getting into it, how you thought about it, and also what are your qualifications for building a system like this.
Sure. Yeah. So you're gonna have to keep me on track with this, Trevor, because I
All
know I
good,
can
man.
ramble about it.
I got you.
But yeah, the circumstance, the capital, and just the ability kind of all hit at the same time. Um, this place, it already came with that type of heating system, so it's a hydronic heating system. For those that are unfamiliar, I have an oil boiler that takes home heating oil, which is effectively just diesel with coloring in it, and that will turn on periodically, heat up some hot water, and then there's pumps that move that hot water around to different cast iron radiators in the room, and then the hot water then slowly releases its heat into the room. There's like a convection current that makes it cycle, and it's a really clean. Well, I say clean. In the rooms, it's clean. Like it's there's no moving parts because it's just radiating. The Now it's not super clean with the boiler part because you're burning oil,
Yeah.
but it's a very intense heat. It's quite nice. As far as the technology, like it was here when the house was here. It's pretty common in a lot of older homes, and I think more so overseas now. Um, the sorry, I think I just lost my train of thought. But
All good.
the integration with the mining system, um, and why I chose immersion with this was really just down to like you have to work with what you have. So
Mhm.
if I had a house that had central air, forced air, like I would have worked with that. But for this, it was hydronic. I'm not cutting holes everywhere to run ducts. So I'm just going to work with what I have. And in order to do that, like I need to find a way to condense or to put heat from a computer into that system.
Mhm.
You can't really do that with air, right? So if you've ever used a miner before, it's basically sounds like a vacuum cleaner. It gets really hot, sucks in air, blows it out. How do you go from air to a liquid, right? So they have air to liquid heat exchangers that can go both ways, but that's really not the most efficient. So
Mhm.
you go down the rabbit hole, like what else is there? And then that's where you get to immersion, where you can take the fans off these machines, you dunk them in a non-electrically conductive oil, and then you pump that oil around to different liquid to liquid heat exchangers, and then that's how you deliver the heat to wherever you want to go. So with my system, the heat can go into 3 spots. So the first stop is the tap water. The second stop is the hydronic heating system, and then the third stop is a separate hydronic system, which just goes outside to a dry cooler. You can think of that if you've ever built a computer or if you've seen like a water cooled computer before. It's basically that, but the size of a house. So um,
All right.
it's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just quickly before we dive really into the system itself,
Mhm.
why did you go and take on this heavy lifting task of turning your oil-based system, your heat, burning oil system
Mhm.
into an electric immersion system? Like, what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah. So uh, besides like just like what I mentioned before, with the trifecta of being able to, it's just the I was sick of just you burn oil and it goes up the chimney and you get soot and smoke and heat and that's it. Like with
Mhm.
this, you get Bitcoin. Now, is this the most efficient? Like if you look at it in like raw energy, uh, not quite. Now, Bitcoin mining is effectively just resistive heating, which is if you ever use a space heater, that's resistive heating or like a hair dryer, uh, and that's just directly converting the kilowatt into heat resistively. Now that is not the most efficient type of heating or cooling that we have available. If you ever like heat pumps are definitely way more efficient, and mainly because they're moving heat and not generating heat. However, this system definitely becomes very worthwhile and cost effective, especially compared to oil, when you get Bitcoin back. So, like right now, I am paying for a kilowatt of electricity. That kilowatt gives me heat and also gives me Bitcoin in return. So, you're getting 2 uses for the same electricity. It's just, it's it's the most efficient way of doing it because you're getting dual use. Like that's what capitalism is. Like if you had a sawmill or a lumber mill, and you're cutting logs and trees, and you have a waste product of all this bark and sawdust, then you compress the sawdust into heat pellets and you sell that. Like anything that you can do to take a waste product and monetize it is going to be more efficient. Excuse me, I'm just on this down.
You're good. I love the way that you explain that. There's tons of different types of businesses out there that during the process of creating the revenue that they use in their business, they try to reduce waste and become more efficient by selling that waste in one way, shape, or form. And
Mm,
basically, with Bitcoin mining and using heat, you're just taking the waste product of heat and you're utilizing it so that you don't have to then pay for that heat. Whereas you were probably paying for oil in order to burn to heat your house. Now you're not paying for that oil. You're paying for the electricity to run your Bitcoin miners. And it doesn't happen always, but sometimes, your Bitcoin generated is break even or sometimes more than what it costs to run the system.
yeah, absolutely. So the profitability here is all over the place. We were
Yeah.
talking right before shooting here that the hash price is just dropping. But even in this case, I try to plan for that. It still makes sense. Like, would you rather get something in return or nothing in return? And I'd rather get
Mhm.
something. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'd like to see or hear from you. I kind of know about this, but I want to let my audience
Mm.
know so that they understand like what it takes to do this. What is the prerequisites? Like what kind of history did you have? Like what qualifications did you have that made you go, I can do this?
Yeah, so I'm like a lifelong tinkerer. I love building, fixing things. I love mechanical systems. My formal training is again in computer science. So that's more like programming. Really nothing to do with this besides the software side. But I've taken on a bunch of different house projects. I've done electrical. I've done paint, trim. I like to be pretty handsy, and I like to know how things work. I don't like black boxes.
Hmm.
So new stuff doesn't really make me shy away. Um, so, but like this project was my first plumbing experience. Like I've never done plumbing before this. Um, but really, like I'm a big believer of the growth mindset. So anybody
Yes.
can learn anything. If you have an internet connection, you have no excuse because that's how I've learned everything. Um, there's YouTube, like there's resources online, and now I mean even with these like little AI chatbots and stuff, they can actually be pretty helpful depending on how you prompt them. So
Yeah.
my qualifications, I mean, I'm not. I would say I'm not. I just had a really strong desire to do this, and there's not many systems of there's not many systems like this in the world. So I don't know for sure. I mean, I'd have to say on a small scale for home heating, there might be like 20 to 50 on the world, maybe more. I mean, it's definitely not in the thousands, but just being able to say like, oh, I built something that is a novel use of Bitcoin mining is really neat. So I hopefully that answers your question.
No, that 100% answers it. Basically, what I wanted to get across to the audience is that you might not know how electrical works, you might not know how plumbing works, you might not know how the heat system in your house works, but you said it yourself, growth mindset, and we have the internet. We live in an age where you can learn absolutely everything, and you're going to have challenges, you're going to have setbacks, there's going to be failures, but these are all learning experiences, and you iterate and you come back at it from a different angle and you try again. And that's part of why I do this podcast is like I want to learn how you do it versus someone like Cade Peterson or Dane does it. You all come at it from a different way. And obviously every house is different. I have a forced air system, you have a hydronic system. So the way that you come at it is completely different than the way that I'm going to come at it. But the fact of the matter is that if you have this growth mindset, you have this idea of I can do anything as long as I keep trying, you can build this. And so diving further into the system itself, before we get, talk about like how you set it up and like what it cost, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome? You talk about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Like, what were those challenges that you overcome and how did you accomplish the build?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge, at least when I, retroactively think back on it, is just that these systems so far have to be so incredibly custom to the house and to the system that's there. Um, there's no real commercial solutions for this, and I know there's people working on those, but I really have trouble seeing how they're going to make something super standard because you want to work with what you have. Um, you don't want to replace if you don't have to. Um,
Hmm.
so just with 100-year-old house comes 100-year-old problems, and there's not much space down there. Everything's pretty cramped. Um, Finding the room, the layout, the organization, like that was really really tricky, especially in this house. I'm sure in a modern build probably wouldn't be that bad. Um, but yeah, in the context of this house, that was really tricky. Aside from that, another issue was just kind of making sure you're sizing things correctly. So the heat exchangers, they're pretty expensive pieces, like a couple hundred to $1,000 depending on what size you get. And if you undersize them, well, then you are leaving thermal transferring ability on the table. And if you oversize them, well, then I mean you kind of maybe waste a little bit of money. So, and I don't know if you ever done heat exchanger math, especially braze plate heat exchanger math.
Nope.
It is not simple. There's tools that make it a little easier. You'll probably see in the pictures that I definitely chose to oversize it in my spot, mainly because once everything's kind of together and once I had, I was doing some plumbing with like threaded connections to soldered connections. Once you crank those down and you solder it, like the only way to redo it is to cut it and start over, and that's a huge pain in the butt. So um, just to make sure I didn't have to go redo things, I made sure to kind of oversize them to begin with. So definitely the math involved was a little tricky. In my write up, I kind of mentioned what's involved, so
Yeah.
we don't
And
have to get into it right now. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
get into that later.
we'll
Yeah.
share the write up here in a bit. I do want to share that. But mainly, like, I wanted to know about some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges, because this isn't an easy system to build. I mean, like, there's a lot of technical know-how that you need to have. So, like, what were some of the resources that you used to help you find out the necessary, like, sizing of the heat exchanger, to help you learn how to plumb this stuff correctly? Like, what were some of the resources?
Yeah, so the biggest shout out I could give is there's a YouTube channel. His name is Bob. I actually met him in Nashville. He's an awesome
Yes.
guy. But from the Home Bitcoin Home Bitcoin Immersion Mining YouTube channel, he's grown quite a lot. But those resources, like the videos that he's put out, have been invaluable. Like he has saved me so much time. It's just high signal content, and he goes over the sizing of heat exchangers, and he's an engineer by trade, so I trust his numbers. I also try to verify them myself as much as I could. But huge shout out to Bob. If you can find his channel or link it in the description, he's a great resource.
100%. So we actually, I know Bob. I met him in person in Nashville as well. We talked with him a little bit. I'd actually like to get him on the show to talk about some stuff, but that'll be
a
in the
great
future.
resource.
He would be. And so all of the audience, like just go to the show description. Make sure that you check that out, because I will put that in there and make sure that you guys can find it. But if you just want to listen, dude, it's type in YouTube Bob's Home Bitcoin Immersion channel, and it'll literally pop up. And I think he's got like, is he in the hundreds of videos now?
He's getting there. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's so great. He really just dives into like how it's done, and he doesn't waste any time with like the minutia of how we got there. We just, here's how it's done. This is what I did. And he's got a lot of really cool animations as well.
Yeah. And so for the Bitcoin side of like tying things into existing systems, his channel has been great. But as far as like the other parts of the system, like just the hydronic part and like, tap water part and the external loop, those are all standard. It's just standard plumbing. So like the only difference here is that we have a new novel heat source putting heat into the system. Everything else is just standard plumbing. For that, I just relied off a lot of plumbing YouTube channels. I have a few plumbers I know in real life that I had them check my work and stuff, and they gave me the sign off, which was definitely helpful.
Yeah,
but yeah, besides the Bitcoin part and like the intersection where new and old tie in together, it's all pretty standard stuff. Like I used off the shelf hydronic components. A lot of the other components I used, well, actually pretty much everything was off the shelf, but I'm kind of using it in maybe the non-traditional type ways. But yeah.
Awesome. And so you used for your tank, you used a pre-set up C2 tank. Is that what you used for fog hashing?
Correct. Yeah, it's the fog hashing C2 tank. And even that, like, it has like a home heating mode, but I'm not exactly sure how they like are expecting people to use that, especially because it's like a single loop system where the oil goes out of the tank and the oil goes directly into the radiator, whereas I have like a dual loop where the oil comes out, goes to a heat exchanger, then water and glycol go out to the radiator. So it's definitely not 100% the desired use case. I mean, maybe it is, but even then, that was maybe the closest commercial product, but I still had to modify it in some ways, and I even had to modify it electrically to get it to work with this system. So
yeah, we had Dane O from Hash Rate House. He came on. He's actually building a tank that's specifically designed for home heating. Whereas the fog hashing is a great unit. Bitcoin mining world, actually, we work with fog hashing a lot to sell their systems. So if anybody wants to buy a system, let me know. But that's neither here nor there for this conversation. You did have to do a little bit of retrofitting to the existing system in order to make it work for your system, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And some of that is just, I'm sure like if they wanted to, they could, revise the firmware on the tank or make a few slight hardware changes, and they'd basically do what I did, but in the default product, none of which was anything too crazy, but I don't know if you want me to get into the technicals of that.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead and dive into it.
Yeah. So one of the gotchas with this tank. So maybe I'll go into like an edge case. So an edge case would be what happens when the power goes out. So power goes out, obviously everything's offline. When the power comes back on, what happens? So normally, and you use these miners, Trevor, like when you plug them directly in the power, what do? They instantly turn on. But with the fog hashing tank, if you return power to it after it was on and you turn it off, it doesn't automatically turn on the pump, like the oil pump, to circulate everything around. And that's mainly because it doesn't know, did we lose power for like a real issue, or did something else turn it off? So it doesn't know. So if in the case where the power goes off, comes back on, the miners would turn on, be sitting in oil that's not circulating, get really hot, and then turn off again. And then they would just eventually, it would cool down. They would turn on and turn off and turn on and turn off. And that's not good for them, like to hit that thermal limit and then turn off. So one of the modifications I had to do was put like a current sensor relay in the electronics. That way, the miners would only turn on if that pump is running, right? So if the power goes off, comes back on, everything is off until I manually go back down and press button, turn back on. So just like little things like that, that's something that could very easily revise. But it definitely added a bit of complexity to the system because I had to manually find a solution around that.
Yeah, but honestly, you were able to find that solution and figure it out. So it's not impossible. It's just, again, it takes a little bit of know-how. It takes a little bit of understanding how the electric system works. And then, okay, I just need to put a relay in here so that the miners don't turn on until the pump is on, because it basically sends power from the pump to the relay, and the relay sends power to the miners. So
Correct,
it's actually really simple. So I used to do car stereo systems, and that was kind of one thing that we would put some relays in for certain things if you wanted to put in a second battery or things like that. So relays are pretty simple to actually figure out if you just kind of read a diagram on it and all that stuff. And it's actually probably pretty simple to just hook it up to the system. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of like the problems I faced, like you were asking that earlier, were like I'm trying to think if there were any like really big problems, but a lot of them, it was just a lot of little things like that, like things that you wouldn't have thought of until you get in the weeds of it and you're like, oh shoot, like I gotta design around this.
Yeah,
Stuff
it's
like
a problem that you're experiencing, and so because you're
Yeah.
experiencing, you're like, oh, I need to fix this. Like
Yeah,
it makes
stuff
it
you
makes
couldn't really
sense.
predict. Yeah.
Exactly. So how long did this build take you from ideation to finished build?
Yeah, so I remember placing the order for the miners in the tank around Thanksgiving of like 2023. I think they arrived a little after Christmas. So let's just say like January 1 was when about when I started. From January 1st, it took me till about mid-February before it was just running, and I was like, I would consider it done. Now, in that 2.5 months, I did nothing else. I didn't go out. I would go to work, do what I needed to. I ordered meals in and like meal kits and stuff, just so like any hour that was a surplus, I was working on this. And now some of it was like, it wasn't all physical work. Some of it was planning and thinking and designing, researching. But any extra free time I had went to this project. So it
What
definitely
I'm
took a long time.
hearing here is that you're single and you don't have a wife or a girlfriend to tell you, get the fuck out of that room, come over, hang with me.
And yeah, Trevor, you'd be right with that.
Hey, I'm a married man. I could not spend all of my free time doing that. So obviously, married men out there, it's going to take you a little bit longer to build a system like this if you decided you wanted to.
And I'm sure if you already had like some of these physical skills, or you were familiar with some of this, you probably could have taken a lot less time. I remember I told the plumber how long it took me with this, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we would have had all this done in like a day." So it's like right there, that would have saved me like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something. Like stuff like that.
Yeah, and you can definitely, to the audience, you could always outsource some of those skills. Like if you don't feel comfortable learning about the plumbing or the electrical, like you could always outsource that to a engineer or plumber or anything like that. But like if you're like Nico or you're like me, well, I don't want to speak for you, but me specifically, I'm too cheap to pay anyone else to do something that I can do myself. So why would I do that? It's like 3 hours of education on YouTube, and then you just get hands-on and you just go build it. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. I like to try to do as much myself as I can, but it's definitely taught me that there is a threshold where like, ooh, this is something I would definitely like to outsource just because of like time, which is good. I mean, it was nice to learn it, but now I know confidently it's like, man, I really don't want to do this. I'd rather have somebody else do it in a much shorter time. But I like to know that I can do it, and I like to know that I can verify whatever people are telling me. Like, oh, you need this. Like, do I really need that? like
Yeah,
that kind
it's
of
kind of
stuff.
like the idea of going to the mechanic to fix your car. You want to be able to
Hmm.
understand how the systems in the car work so that he doesn't price gouge you on certain things. It's kind of
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
that. So
Exactly.
makes
Yeah.
sense. I'm going to share my screen here. I want to share this GitHub repository so people can kind of see. And I'm actually going to put the link on the screen. Hold on one second. Let me pull it up. Where did I put it? I did have, there it is. Okay. Let's see, right there. So I'm going to show that. If you guys go to that website right
Mm.
there, that you can actually find the GitHub repository, and you can see what's on the screen right now. But I want to kind of like show people your system in particular.
Sure.
We're going to kind of skip over like all of these calculations and stuff. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit, but I'm trying to keep it kind of high level. Let's see, where are the pictures?
Oh, they're all the
So
way at the bottom. Well, yeah, there's like a
yeah,
simplified diagram. I have a few of those. And then,
yes,
yeah, most of like the real life pictures are all the way at the bottom.
yeah. So just kind of explain. This is the diagram. Explain how this works. So you've got tap water in from the street, and it goes in, comes down through the exchanger here. Just kind of give people an idea of what they have to do in order to make this happen.
Sure, yeah. So I'm not a graphic artist, so I have gotten some comments on the clarity of this picture. So let me try to like simplify it. Um, so these brazed plate heat exchangers, those are those copper things. You see they have 4 ports, and you see the purple arrows. One's going one way, one's going the other way.
Mm-hmm.
That is for so they are the most efficient when you can do what's called a counterflow design. So like they're just passing across each other and going opposite directions. That's the most efficient thermal transfer. So the left side is tied to the left side on left side top and bottom are tied, and right side top and bottom are tied. So um, this basically allows the two fluids to pass each other and not touch. So like I don't want immersion oil in my tap water, and I don't want water getting into the immersion side. So um, that's basically how the heat transfer happens. So you can see it's kind of staggered. So it comes out of the fog hashing tank from that big red arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, right there. Yeah, so it comes out and then goes up into that first tap water heat exchanger, and then goes up over to the radiators, and then down to the outside. Yep, and then back. So that's basically the circuit that it takes. And
Okay.
what I tried to do here was have the best of both worlds. So usually, and especially like in Bob's videos, they talk about like single loop, dual loop, or triple loop. And basically, what that means is well, it means exactly what it sounds like. So a single loop system would be connecting the tank directly to the radiator and just exhausting outside, just one loop. Dual loop would be where you have one of these exchangers, and then the other side of the loop, like one side is oil, one side is whatever other fluid, and then that's where it goes. And when you add extra stages of loops, you get less thermal transfer each time because the process isn't 100% efficient. So
Mm-hmm.
what I tried to do here with this 3-stage exchanger is all 3 of those are one loop, and then the act of moving the other fluid through them basically turns it on and off. So this is technically like a dual loop, but you can see they're all tied to the same loop, which gives you the maximum amount of heat in each of those spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hopefully that
so
answers your question.
yeah, no, that definitely does. So explain to me, what is the whole purpose of this device down here at the bottom? What is that?
Yeah, so that's the outside exchanger. So when I designed this system, the assumption that I made was that it was basically going to be running all the time because at the time it was profitable at my current electricity rates to mine. So when I didn't need that heat inside, either in tap water or in the heating the house, that heat would have to be dissipated somehow, and I didn't want to turn off because it was still profitable to run, so it would just dissipate outside. So that's what that is
Okay.
for. Yeah.
Yeah, that just so everybody understands. And this heat exchanger, is that what it's called? Heat exchanger?
Yeah. Which one? The one that we're staring at right there.
Yeah, right here
Yeah.
down
So
at
that
the
would be
bottom.
like a water or a liquid to air heat exchanger, or like a
Okay.
dry cooler is what they're also called.
Dry
Yeah.
cooler. That's the word I was actually looking for. So for the people, why is my thing it's not letting me scroll anymore. Up here you see the C2 tank, you guys. That actually comes with the dry cooler. So
Correct. Yep.
you purchase that together, but it's not letting me scroll. Okay, whatever.
We can do if you want to cut or something,
Yeah,
we can fix
it's
that.
all good. Let me see if I can't. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. It's fine. Whatever. We're gonna go just back to over here. I think my computer's getting a little wiggy, but basically what I was getting at is that the heat exchangers that you were talking about, the braze plate heat exchangers, are the off-the-shelf systems that you're buying, plus all of the plumbing, the electrical, things like that. But when you buy the C2 tank, it comes with that dry cooler, and you just kind of have to plumb it together on that single loop.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
I hope that kind of explains to the audience like how the system works a little bit. And if you'd like to dive a little more into how these single loop, dual loop, and triple loop systems work, again, Bob's home Bitcoin mining or home Bitcoin immersion channel is the place to go. He does a really good job of doing it. But I want to talk about some of the costs associated with building a system like this. Obviously, you've got your miners, you've got the C2 tank, you have those kinds of things. But there's also the heat exchangers, which you said were pretty expensive, and all of the plumbing. So what kind of costs can we look at for these separate individual items?
Yeah, so and especially for immersion systems, anytime you do an immersion, the cost is going to go like way up. So had I been in a situation where I had like forced air or central air with ducts, keeping things air cooled as much as possible, you're definitely going to get way more hash for your dollar. So, and that's really because there has to be extra infrastructure in place to do the immersion, to do everything that it's needed, like the pumps, the pipes, the tanks, the fluid, all that stuff. So the cost, at least with this, it was about when I bought it, I think around maybe like $13,000 or so. Some of that was the miners, some of that was the tank as a kit, some of that was the fluid, and then most of the other stuff was miscellaneous parts and pipes and copper and the heat exchangers and things of that nature, or the electrical work like breakers and stuff like that. So yeah, around 13,000. It since I now that is also only because I did all the work myself. Now, if I had outsourced, the electrical or the plumbing, that would have really eaten into the cost, and probably wouldn't have made it worth it. So, if you can, the more you can do yourself, the more it's going to make this whole system, like as a whole, worth it. But yeah, hopefully that I can go into like specifics. But
So
that's
let's talk
high
a little
level.
bit about the specifics. So obviously, I think the price on the C2 tank is like $3,000. Is that correct?
I'm trying to remember. They might have raised the prices in the past year, but it could have been around like $2 to $3,000 somewhere in there.
Yeah, and then your miners are obviously, it can hold 2 miners, which
Correct. Yep.
is all great, but that the price or the cost of acquisition kind of like goes up and down based on the hash price. Right now, I think 2 S19s, you can pick up the S19 J Pros for like $400 a piece. You could pick up the new K Pros for anywhere between $1,200 and $1,500, somewhere like that. But then you could also dump S21s in there, and those devices are running about $5,000 a piece. So the miners are kind of that's kind of a changing cost. It's variable.
It's extremely variable. There's so many factors that go into the profitability of a whole system. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so one thing that I heard, Cade Peterson talk about is it's the micro infrastructure. That's basically your C2 tank. That's your plumbing. That's your electrical. That's your dry cooler. That's micro infrastructure. And that is like a one-time cost. You buy it, you put it in.
Correct.
Your miners are kind of a variable cost that fluctuates over time. And obviously, because we have a hash price that changes, we have a hash rate that goes up and down, difficulty changes, the price that you, or the amount of sats that you can mine kind of goes up and down. But you could, in theory, well, not in theory, in actuality, you could swap out those miners for new, more efficient miners and send the price per kilowatt back up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% correct, Trevor. And that's really one of the goals with this system is like, I know like this ASIC mining hardware is a depreciating asset. And so just having the ability, although be it very messy because of all the immersion fluid, but just having the ability to take out inefficient hardware and put newer, more efficient hardware in is definitely going to help, the whole system. Because again, like you said, those are fixed costs, all the infrastructure involved around it. And something that a lot of people in Nashville really like to talk about is it seems that the efficiency gains in mining are kind of slowing down. So like 5 years ago, if you were to buy a miner from 4 years ago compared to the one from 5 years ago, it would be like an order of magnitude better. But the 19K Pros that I have compared to the 21s, like, yeah, there's an efficiency improvement, but it's not as drastic as it was back then. So like the improvement per generation is slowly going down.
Yeah.
So eventually I'll run these until it makes zero sense to, and then maybe I'll swap them out. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
It really, there's a lot of factors that you have to think about. You got to think about the price per terahash. You got to think
Mhm.
about like the acquisition of the machines, how old they are, a bunch of stuff. But mainly the micro infrastructure is what we're talking about. So if we pull the machinery completely from the micro infrastructure, how much did you pay for all of that?
Oh man. So I think if I'm remembering correctly, the miners themselves for both of them were around 4K total. So it
Mhm.
might have been around nine-ish thousand dollars for the micro infrastructure
Okay.
and
Yeah.
everything involved around that. Yeah.
In all actuality, I mean, as someone who doesn't have a whole lot of capital to spend, I
Mhm.
mean, if you think about it, replacing the boiler in your hydronic system probably cost around $9,000, I'm sure.
It does, and that was part of what I used in the cost calculation of this. Like, yeah, like if I did this myself, I would spend around this much, and it would basically be the cost of a new boiler. However, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I've designed this system again with it being custom, is that this system can work either I can use just the miners, or I can use the boiler, or I can use both together.
Yeah,
And so I have backups and I have redundancy now. So in that cost is the peace of mind of redundancy, which I,
yeah,
I really like, because there have been a few times during the past 9 months where something happens to the mining system and I have to shut it down, and then I just flip down the boiler, and then I have, like, nobody would notice. Like, it's just, you can
Mhm.
switch back to the old thing. And if we get like cold snap and it's down to like 0 degrees outside, and I need a little extra power, I can always flip that on too. So I'm not going to be without heat, really.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask you, is if your
Mm.
existing system was still active and still able to run. And the reason, like, I always think about like those kinds of things, like if you're going to build a water heater, why you would want the actual water heater to still work is, well, first off, if you sell your house, you're probably
Mm.
not going to sell your house to a Bitcoiner. I mean, you might be able to, which would be cool. I mean, I'm sure that there would be Bitcoiners incentivized to buy that, but you're probably going to sell it to somebody who's a no coiner, who's never heard
Mm.
about Bitcoin or doesn't understand how it works. So like, they're not going to be incentivized to like run the system. So you want to be able to make sure that like you can kind of pull that system away, leave it there. So if they do want to get into it, they can, kind of do the rabbit hole journey, but making sure that it's still active the way that it was set up before. So you don't hurt the resale value of your home. But resale value of your home aside, you kind of touched on is like what happens in the event that your system that you built fails.
Mhm.
You want to be able to have that redundancy so that you can continue heating your home and not freeze. So that's very important. I think it's something that people should think about. Don't just rip everything out, find a way to integrate it and have both systems.
Mhm. And that's why I have trouble seeing what a commercial solution would be like, because
Mhm.
it's really a much easier sell when it's like, oh, here's this experimental new thing, but there's redundancy. Like, that's a much easier pill to swallow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely, I'm with you on that. I don't know how the commercial side will play into it, and
Mm.
maybe somebody will figure something out. But I really think that a lot of this home heat reuse stuff is just like crazy Bitcoiners who want to get some KYC free sats without spending all of this extra money to, well, I guess you are spending extra money, but like you're a crazy Bitcoiner, so it's fine. It's what it
Mm.
is. But I also see it as like there's businesses that are going to be ran by crazy Bitcoiners that want to do it as well. But building a commercial system where you can just plug and play it is just kind of the numbers on that. It's almost infeasible because everything is so different.
Yeah. And it really depends on your location, your electricity price,
Yeah.
cost to acquire the miners, the infrastructure. But you did just kind of spark something in my mind that I wanted to touch on,
Yeah.
which is really relevant now with the hash price just continuously falling, and with that comes this whole system being less profitable. But just to have, or just to stress how important it is in the Bitcoin mining space, like, all of the big players are very profit driven. Like, like if you're running a multi-million-dollar mining operation on a large grid scale, the second it's not profitable to run, you're turning those off. Now, what we have seen in the past few months since the halving is a lot of miners actually staying on. I think we were talking before this, is that the hash rate, the network-wide hash rate, is at like record highs, which Trevor and I were both looking at each other like, what's going on here? But what I wanted to stress, at least with these small-scale systems and people like myself, is that it's really important to have a source of network hash rate that is less economically tied than these big players. So even though it is not, let's say like dollar wise, it's not profitable for me to run, I'm still going to run it anyway because I need heat, and I would still be running anything anyway because you have to pay for heat. It's just a sunk cost. So having distributed hash rate that is disconnected from purely economic factors, I see as really important, because then the network can still stay running. And that actually also gives me, on the small scale, an edge over these big commercial miners, because I can be really efficient. And even if I were to run it break even, that's still a profit because I'm getting heat and I'm getting Bitcoin. Like so it changes how the cost calculations work.
I mean, even if you were under break even, even if you were paying like $1, $2, $3 a day, I mean, how much do you pay for the oil to heat your home per day that you're running that heat? All of a sudden now, at least you're getting KYC free sats. And for those that you don't know, KYC just means know your customer. You either buy it on an exchange, or you trade it, or you trade a good or service for it. But what Nico is doing is he is paying for electricity to mine Bitcoin, getting KYC free sats that aren't tied to his name, aren't tied to his identity, and he's heating his home. To me, that right there is like, that's worth it. I would pay to do that,
And that was definitely part of the consideration, because looking back, like, had I just bought the Bitcoin with what I spent, I would definitely be ahead in Bitcoin terms. But now it's kind of like I've planted a tree almost. Like, I'm going to be continuously, like, especially now we're getting into like the colder months, here I go mining again. So it's something that'll continuously, like, it's monetizing a sunk cost, really, which is great.
Yeah. So here's a big question. We talk about profitability. We talk about like the Bitcoin that you get back. Have you made a return on your investment?
So it's still well within the first year. I haven't had two cold seasons yet.
Okay.
I'd really like to see where the numbers end up. I will say so far, every month has been a loss. Now your viewers might hear that and be like, "Oh, this guy's an idiot." But what I was paying before in oil was also just always a loss because I'm just burning oil. So what I have now is a system that is cheaper than if I were to just burn oil, because like I pay for the electricity with the sats back in dollar value when I get paid. That is cheaper than the oil price that I was paying before, which in my case makes this whole system worth it, right? Like, I'm just trying to save money and stack sats. So the profitability has had wild swings. Like right before the halving, I wouldn't say it was break even, but it was pretty darn close. After the halving, it's just been killer. Like I've tried so many different things, and that's why I can't comfortably speak to the profitability just yet, because I have tried different variations of underclocking. I've tried scheduled running. I've tried a bunch of different things, and what I've settled on right now, which seems to be the most efficient, is something that I don't know what else to call it, but it's like a water heater mode, where this has added complexity to the system. But I'm now in software automating the miners turning on and off, so that minimizes the time being on, and when they are on, it's basically the same as if you're running a commercial water heater. Like, the elements inside will turn on, heat up the water, and then they'll maintain a temperature. And then when it cools down, they'll turn back on, and continues in a loop. So that's exactly what I'm doing now, and that's given me a great balance of I'm not running and burning electricity and not getting anything back, because at that point it would just be worth it to buy the sats with dollars. And it's, when it is running, I'm only running because I need to. And so then I'm always getting a return on whatever I'm running. So that has definitely helped minimize the costs.
Okay.
Sorry, it was a lot all at once.
No, you're good. Absolutely perfect. I really like the way that you explained that. So for those of you that don't know, there's different pools that you can mine to, and each machine, you set up the kind of configuration to mine to a certain pool. And there's different payout schemes. So you can get paid based on your terahash output constantly per day, or you can mine with Ocean, which kind of you only get paid if they find a block. So do you mine with Ocean? Do you mine with like an FPPS pool?
Yeah, so through the past few months, I've definitely tried a bunch of different things. I have mined with Ocean a bit in the past just to try it, and I really like what they're standing for in their mission. We were talking a bit before about the block size wars and increasing block size, but that's a whole other rabbit hole of inscriptions and junk data, taking advantage of the fee arbitrage stuff in the block. So we're not going to get into that right now. But yes, I have mined with Ocean. I've mined with the Brains pool, great pool. I've also done a bunch of solo mining just whenever I feel lucky. Haven't hit anything. I'd love to, but we'll see. The FPPS, it's basically, think of it as like, yes, I'm mining for them, but it's kind of like they're renting hash from me in a way. So that seems to be working out pretty well with my intermittent system. Now, if you have a system that's running all the time, it would probably, you might find a better pool that has a better payout scheme. I know the Tides payout system really helps with the miners being on all the time.
Yeah.
But now that, since we have a bunch of these intermittent sources popping online, I haven't found like a things pool yet where it's maybe designed for that. Maybe that's a market opportunity for anybody listening, or maybe I might try to take that one on myself. But yeah, it's trying to find a pool that matches with the use case was a little tricky, but I think I've got it pretty dialed in with the pools now.
It sounds like with your intermittent water heater mode, you really wouldn't want to be using Ocean and their Tides payout scheme, just because you only get paid when you get a block. So if you're off and they find 3 or 4 blocks and then you turn back on, you're at that point you're just paying for electricity and you're not getting that sats back. Whereas like what you're doing with the intermittent, you probably want to be paid daily based on your terahash output.
Correct. Yeah, and I don't I don't do the daily payout. I try to consolidate it like monthly. Otherwise, you get a lot of dust transactions. But it's really neat to see a lot of pools that are starting to do like lightning payouts. And while that is like a little bit further from true Bitcoin mining, it definitely makes these intermittent sources more attractive, especially if you're running like older hardware that would probably never get a standard on-chain payout. You can do the lightning payout and maybe you get like a few thousand sats. But again, better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Yeah, a couple things I want to say. Like first, I have my sats still on Brains Pool because I haven't set up my Lightning payouts. Like the ones that I first started mining with this S9 over here, is like I still have those sats on Brains Pool because they haven't paid me out. And that's one of the reasons why I really like Ocean, is because Ocean, if you kind of stop mining and you're under that payout threshold, the payout threshold is like 1 million sats. If you're under that threshold and you stop mining with them for like a month, they give you your sats, like they don't just hold it, they send it to you. They don't like holding onto it. So that's something that I really enjoy about Ocean. But also, you talk about, renting hash rate, and mining and all this stuff. And like I really like what Bitcoin Mechanic talks about and it's like, we're not even technically miners, man. Like we're hashers. Like we create hash rate and we rent that hash rate out. We're not configuring block templates. We're not, running the pools. We're not doing any of that. So really, while we call ourselves miners, and that's fine, I'm going to continue calling myself a miner. Like we're not Bitcoin miners, we're Bitcoin hashers. That's just something I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. It's really disconnected from the OG where you could mine on a CPU and you get a block every now and then. But as the system scales and as the difficulty increases, you're going to pay out less and less. And it just really in the world of like fiat economics, it's just really hard to know when you're not going to get you don't know when your next payment's coming in. So like you could be running for 2 months and never get anything, or you could be running, you get 2 blocks in a row, like stuff like that. And at least for my residential use case, I'd much rather get something. Now I know I'm sure the Bitcoin Mechanic would probably disagree with me using FPPS, but for a small scale system, I've seen it to be the best case scenario, at least so far that I've found.
Yeah, well, you can't justify keeping your heat on 24/7. There's going to be 7-8 months out of the year where you don't need that heat, so you're going to die from heat exhaustion if you just keep dumping that heat into your house. And if the mining profitability isn't enough to where you can, run it through the dry cooler and dump that heat outside. It's like, it doesn't really make sense for you. So I understand why you're running off the FPPS payout scheme versus like tides. So it does make sense to me in that aspect. And honestly, everybody's allowed to have their own opinion. It's actually really cool. We are going to have Bitcoin Mechanic on the show in the next few weeks.
Oh, awesome.
So like, I want to talk to him about, his opinions on this stuff, but really, like, you do what you think is most cost effective and works for your system and works for you. Everybody, that's the greatest thing about capitalism, is like real capitalism. You go out and you do what's economically viable for you. So let's see. I asked you what you made on your return on your investment. You kind of haven't really gotten there yet, which is fine. You're still kind of break even at the point where you're like making, or you're getting sats back versus paying for heat and not getting anything back. So it's still economically viable in that aspect for people to understand. But I'm curious, you have an immersion system, and with the cool thing about immersion system is it doesn't have to be looped only into your heat for your house. Have you started playing with integrating that same heat system into like your water heater or like a dryer or something along those lines?
Yeah, so funny enough you asked that. I actually have hookups that I haven't yet used, but I have an extra loop kind of plumbed in for attempting to use the heat for the dryer. There's a few other people online and some that I'm in like group chats with that are also trying to hooking a miner up to the dryer, because it's really like a great use case. It's just right now it's just a big resistive heating element. You definitely should be getting sats back for that. However, I haven't pursued that too much just because anything with plumbing involved is just really difficult, and I don't think the heat output that would go into the dryer, at least from the way that I currently have designed with my system, would be enough to really dry the clothes without running it for like 4 hours or something.
Yeah.
But I do really, really, really love that use case, and I hope somebody, if it's not myself, somebody else can like crack that nut and really get like a better design system for a dryer. I've seen a lot of cool systems like with these other guys where maybe they have like a greenhouse and they want to heat it like at night or just keep it warm, so they'll use a Bitcoin miner to heat the greenhouse and things like that. So there's a lot of other really interesting use cases. Anything that involves heat, you might as well use this.
100%. The reason I ask is because, obviously we talk about how you've only got so many heating months out of the year to heat your home, but hot water, your dryer, heating a pool, heating a hot tub, these are things that you can do like all year round. And so if you can figure out how to, like you said, crack that nut and figure it out, like it's a great use case. The dryer specifically, and I think it was Bob on his Home Bitcoin Immersion channel where he talked about his build for his dryer. It's like right now the chips, they don't run hot enough. Like you can't get that chip hot enough to create the resistive heat that you need to actually dry your clothes. And maybe in the future, like we have all these different chip manufacturers kind of coming to market. Maybe somebody will build a chip that can withstand, like that's not really like profit based, but is actually like heat based. Like we can take a chip and heat it up to 130 degrees, because that's really what we need, is about 130 degrees temperature to get to that point. And that would kind of be the same thing with like a water heater. From what I understand is that, like my water coming out of my tap is at its hottest is about 120, 130 degrees, but you can't get the chips to transfer that much heat. So the best thing that I've heard is, and Dane kind of explained it in one of our past episodes, and actually I don't even think that one's out. Well, it'll be out by the time this one's out. So the way he explained it is that you would want like a tank that's kind of like a pre-tank. You would heat the water up in that tank, and as it goes to your water heater, instead of it coming out of the ground and being like 60 degrees, now it's 90 degrees, 70 degrees, or 80 degrees. And instead of having to go from 60 to 120, it's going from like 90 to 120. So it's cheaper to heat up. You still have to use the water heater. You still have to pay for that electricity, but you're not paying as much. So that's kind of like the way that I understand that system.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I thought about adding like a buffer tank, like you were describing, to this system. It definitely adds a lot of complexity, at least retroactively, because I didn't design for it initially. I definitely should have. But the closest thing I have to that is I keep the tank of oil at like a constant temperature usually. So it hovers between like 46 and 53 degrees Celsius, and that's enough to give me like 110 to 120 degrees output for the tap water, which is plenty to shower off of.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
oh yeah, and it's kind of nice. It's like, oh wow, I'm showering and I'm getting paid right now in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely cool. I mean, immersion, you can really take it wherever you want to go and just kind of like build a system that works for you. And that's kind of like why I'm so into immersion right now. Air is great because it's cheaper, but
Mhm.
immersion and maybe even hydro in the future. I hear some twitterings on the X platform of people who are trying to design hydro systems that can heat that water so much better. But we are not there yet. So immersion is kind of like where we're at with it. And so that's kind of like why I'm so excited about immersion. But let's see. We're kind of coming up to the end of this. I've got a few more questions I want to ask you. But if you could go back, with all of the knowledge that you have today, would you build the system again?
I would say I would, and the only thing I would change if I could go back is I probably wouldn't have gone with the C2. I think I would have tried to find a slightly bigger tank. While the two miners are great, I kind of would have liked the expandability of maybe putting a third or a fourth. Uh, Mainly just because after it was done, I was like, man, I really want to get to a petahash in my house. Like that would be so
Hmm.
cool to say, like, yeah, I have a petahash residential. Um,
Yeah.
but I definitely still would do this. Just building the system and talking to people like yourself, Trevor, and everybody else who I've talked to this about. Like I have seen people's like I tell people about this who have know nothing about Bitcoin, and I can see the gears turning and their face just kind of like lights up and they're like, wow, like that's like really clever. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, so just being like a conversation topic, the opportunities this has led to me, and even just being here now, like I would absolutely do it again.
Awesome. I love to hear that. And maybe that's part of the Bitcoin ethos. When you become a Bitcoiner, you're just crazy about Bitcoin and you want to figure out ways to learn more. And I've figured out that the best way to learn something is to actually do it. You
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know. And until you dive into the project and actually start playing with it, you're not going to know that you need something like a relay to help you shut off your miners and keep them off until the pump comes on. Like you're not going to
Mhm.
know that. And you're not going to know how the heat is transferred and distributed throughout the system. And so, getting hands-on and learning about it is the best way to educate yourself, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And for anybody listening, if the viability of your potential system is really just going to come down to your electricity rates and how handy you are, but really the electricity rates is going to be a determiner for how profitable you are. If you can, at least right now with the hash price, what were you saying before, Trevor? What were you saying is like the break even for most of these systems? Now,
I
again,
think it's
when
about
we
eight
say
cents a kilowatt hour, but it really depends on your acquisition cost. A break
mhm,
even is about 8 cents.
yeah, it for the viewers like break even, that's a very loaded term because it
Yeah.
depends on not only your acquisition cost, like the joules per terahash, the
Yep.
cost, like the infrastructure, like everything. Like it's like a really big sliding scale equation for profitability. But the rule of thumb is the cheaper you can get your electricity, the better.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of talk about like solar systems, not like planets and stuff, but people put like residential solar, and if they have excess, they'll dump it into Bitcoin mining. So I see stuff like that potentially catching on too. So
And that's
anything that you
that's
can
all
do,
fine and good. That's all
yeah.
fine and good. But just to let everybody understand that like those solar systems are not cheap. You're looking
Oh
at
no no no.
15 to 20,000 dollars of acquisition just to put the solar system on your house. So that's great and all, but it's not something that's feasible for like myself because I live in a climate where like we get sun maybe 30% out of the year. So it's not really
Yeah
feasible to spend $30,000, $20,000 on a system that heats my house on average 30%. So,
yeah
that's again,
absolutely. Like,
yeah, it
I did the
comes
math
down
here,
to,
and it
go
didn't
ahead.
work here either. But
Yeah.
it really like there's so many different variables you can tweak for profitability. That was mainly like the point I wanted to get across. It's like
Yeah.
for like your situation, your house, anybody who's listening, like I'm sure you can be resourceful and think of something to make it profitable for where you live.
Yeah, and the factors are going to change based
Mm.
on where you are, who you are, the house that you have, like what system you want to build. Like it's all different. It's different for everybody, and you really have to like run the numbers and figure out what is best for you.
And
Like Nico said.
yeah, and Trevor, you were saying you were able to heat your house with an S9, like, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See,
I
like,
have a small house.
mhm. Yeah, and it takes me two K pros to heat the house, and then even like if I were to get like a big cold snap, you down like the negative, I would probably need to turn on the backup heat. So like it really just depends, and if you have, the smaller the space you have, the easier it's going to be to heat it.
Absolutely. So,
Mm.
well, I'm down on my questions, man. I think the last two that I have, these are philosophical questions that I
Sure.
ask everybody. I like to ask these questions that my audience knows that I ask them because everybody comes at Bitcoin differently. Everybody sees a different problem in Bitcoin, and so you kind of have like a different idea. And so my questions to you, the first one is, what about the Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin ecosystem keeps you up at night?
Ooh, keeps me up at night. Um, I'll probably mostly echo, the Bitcoin mechanic. Um, just with the spam that we're seeing and all the ordinals and stuff, just the non-transaction use cases. I'm really not a big fan of any of that. So just to see like block space being eaten up by that kind of stuff, it I don't know about keep me up at night, but it's definitely one of my biggest worries.
Mhm.
Besides that, I'd say maybe the centralization that we're seeing with the Coinbase custodying most of these big clients Bitcoin. So it's not just like BlackRock, but um, any other, like I think they're even holding like Sailor's Bitcoin too. So like
Yeah.
just one centralized point of either confiscation via government or hacking. Now, while I think the hacking is pretty low on the probability scale, it's still a possibility, and it's just having a huge target on one company. Just I'm not the first to say it. I think everybody else can see it too. Like that is probably not the most wise thing.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
I maybe on like the more mining aspect, I definitely worry about in the next 4, 8, 12 years. I'm speaking in block halving cycles, but um, what does the small scale mining scene look like for people that are going to be mining like effectively like dust transactions? Like, are they going to be all only forced to be on Lightning? Like, would a system that what I have right now even be worth it in 12 years? Like, I don't know. Like, and people talk about dust a lot with transactions. For those that don't know, dust is if you have a UTXO of Bitcoin that just doesn't make sense to spend because the fee to spend it would be more than the actual UTXO. Um, that can happen really easily with these small scale systems. So what does that look like in the next 12 years? So I'd say a combination of all those things. Hopefully that kind of answers your question. I can go into either one of those a little bit more if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have to dive into that. I
Mm.
think that definitely answered my question. I mean, those are valid fears to have, things that we should be paying attention to. One of my biggest fears, just to talk about it, is I think that people coming into Bitcoin need to understand these things, and a lot of people coming into Bitcoin today are really only looking at Bitcoin number go up. Number
Yeah.
go up is great. A lot, like, we're all about number go up. We want to get more value for the amount of Bitcoin that we hold. But when you're holding it on an exchange, when you can't get the UTX value out of it, what happens to Bitcoin? Like, what
Mhm.
happens when it becomes controlled by these central parties and we don't have as much access to it? So that is something that scares me. And so that's why I do the podcast. I'm trying to educate the masses as much as possible. And I think education through my own journey is more authentic than just like spewing towards people. So yeah, that's
Mm.
the great answer. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I appreciate
And
that.
actually, just another fear just popped up into my head. This is like another common one. I'm sure that you've probably experienced this too. But if you try to explain Bitcoin, or even if somebody's just being like very genuine and inquisitive, they like you can try to talk to them about it, but they still might not understand, or maybe they understand like the monetary policy stuff, but they don't understand like the user experience of it all. Which keep in mind is it's a very big barrier for people. Like you and I have been doing this for a while now. Like I know how to send a transaction, you know how to send a
Mhm.
transaction. Um, it's really hard to talk to the parents, the grandparents,
Yeah.
the millions and millions and millions of other people that like they barely even know how to use their mobile banking app. They're not going to know how to
Yeah.
use Bitcoin. Like,
What do you
so
mean I have to sign a transaction? What does that mean?
exactly. So I worry that like there are some really great products out there that try to simplify the user experience. Now I'm personally played with it, but the what is it, the block wallet, what the one
Oh,
Jack Dorsey, the
yeah,
one that's an octa, what is that?
the little
A
octagon, and you
BitKey.
like tap to sign. Yeah.
Yeah, that one, from friends that I've heard that bought that, they really like the user experience. It simplifies it as much as it can be, but you can only make some of these concepts so simple before you abstract it too much, and then
Hmm.
whoever's using it has zero idea what's going on,
Hmm.
which it's kind of a parallel to what we see now. Like if you ask somebody, how does your bank account work and what is the bank doing with your money, they don't know.
Yeah.
So really, I guess something that keeps me up at night more than everything else that I previously listed is just the lack of not just financial knowledge, but the lack of understanding of what goes on behind the scenes of all these financial systems. That just really scares the crap out of me, because how are we going to transition to something better if you don't even know why the first one is bad?
Yeah, and I think that's why education is so important. I've talked about it before, but people, and like the normies, the
Mm,
average person, really, in order for us to see change, like they need to take more responsibility.
yeah.
The banking system that we have today, it's obfuscated responsibility completely out to these central third parties, and you don't have control of your money. If you want control, you have to have responsibility as well. And that means the volatility of, I could lose my Bitcoin. I could do
Mm,
something stupid. I could, go have a boating accident. I could lose my keys, and then I lose access to all of my Bitcoin. But me personally, I would much rather have that responsibility and have it on my shoulders than not be able to access my Bitcoin on, holidays, or, not be able to withdraw a certain amount because the bank doesn't have it. So
yeah, and it's incredible just how little money the banks actually have on them. Like you
yeah,
go to a bank and try to get like, hey, I need to withdraw $5,000. I want to buy a beater car or something. Like most of the time they'll be like, oh, can you come back in 2 days? Like we don't have
yeah,
cash on hand. It's like that's
yep.
that's insane. So
My father-in-law actually has a story about that. Like he wanted to use $2,000 to go and buy something. I'm not going to say what it was,
mm,
but he wanted to go buy something, so he went to a bank to withdraw 3,000 or $2,000 cash. And the bank, first and foremost, they were like, "Well, why do you need $2,000 cash?"
mm,
So it's like, why do I have to tell you why I want my money? Give me my money. And secondly, he had to come back the next day so that they could actually have the money on hand to give him.
mm.
So what you're
Yeah,
talking about is something is very scary in Bitcoin.
mm. And again, most people really don't think about any of this. You say like, oh, this XYZ person got banned from using banking services, and it doesn't even click like, oh, that can happen to anybody. That could happen to me. Even if it could just even be as simple as an accident, like a glitch. Like how often does like Wells Fargo have an issue and somebody gets charged some crazy amount and they have to go fight for that back, or anything really? Like,
Hmm.
and what we're seeing is, think of, if we think of these banks in Bitcoin terms, well, we only have one node, and that's the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is keeping track of all these big bank transactions, and the banks are keeping track of all the smaller little level transactions and stuff. And that's how that system currently works. It's very like top down, centralized, because it needs to be for efficiency. What we were talking about before with everything in engineering is only trade-offs. We are trading a bit of that efficiency for decentralization and fairness and responsibility, stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the Bitcoin world.
exactly. And people just need to understand that. And once they understand that, there's reasons why we have these trade-offs. Um, Maybe we'll overcome my fears. Maybe more people will understand it. I hope, that's my hope, anyways. So, all right, I have one more philosophical question, and then we can wrap up.
You got it. Yeah.
So this one's my favorite. What does Bitcoin mean to you?
Oh man. I mean, I don't want to be cheesy, like to give the sailor answer like Bitcoin is hope, but I really think that it is a way out of the current system. And I don't want to, I definitely don't want to berate the hope word, but just showing people that there is a third option, that you can do something else, that um, to get out of all this nonsense that we have to deal with, and all the inflation, all the control, all the the decentralizing of authority. It really, I, I'd say Bitcoin is the answer to humanity's oldest problem. That's maybe what I would put it as. Like,
Yeah.
like we've how many you read the Bitcoin Standard? How many civilizations have come and gone, and eventually they do something the equivalent of printing money. They're clipping coins or whatever, and
Debase the currency.
yep, they debase it, and it has to reset, and it starts over, and it's been happening for thousands and thousands of years, and it wasn't until 2008 all the way up till right now that we finally have something else that hasn't been tried before that we can rely on and explore and be excited about. That's what Bitcoin is to me. Bitcoin, it's the answer to the world's oldest problem.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nico, I will use the Michael Saylor Bitcoin is hope, because as a father, we kind of talked about it a little bit. I can't remember if we talked about it off camera or on camera, but there's so many people, so many millennials, so many Gen Zs, and even Generation One, which is my son. They're growing up and they're realizing that they can't maintain their value. And because they can't maintain their value, they'll never own a home, they'll never be able to retire, and they can't afford a family. And for me personally, like, the greatest thing I ever did was create my son. You know what I mean? I look into his eyes, his little newborn infant eyes, and I realized that that is what life is about. And if you are running through your life and you're like, I'm never going to be able to have that because I can't afford it, like, what kind of life are you going to live? You know what I mean? And so Bitcoin is hope, because Bitcoin, like you said, gives you the ability to maintain value and hold it into the future. Nobody's debasing your Bitcoin. Nobody's going to debase that currency from you. And so now the idea of owning a home can be thought of. The idea of starting a family can be thought of. And my son will grow up in a world where his dad's a Bitcoiner, and his value that he creates will be able to be maintained throughout his entire life. And so that right there, that is hope. And I don't care if it's cheesy, I don't care if it's overused or not, but that's what it means. It means we can actually live a better life.
Exactly. And it's definitely not like, I completely agree with you. I'm not in the same position as you, but I hope to one day be. And I can you imagine what it would be like to not have something like Bitcoin? Like, what would you be doing right now? And you brought your son into the world, and there's nothing that you can do to save your energy and your money and stuff. Like, you would basically have to put it in assets, and that's why we saw like real estate take off for the past decade, but we had low interest rates, right? So, what would you do if you didn't have Bitcoin?
Oh man, if I didn't have Bitcoin, I mean, I'd probably be lost. You think about, like, what is the number one reason for why 90% of marriages fail? Because they're freaking out and
Usually
stressed out
money.
about
Yeah.
money. Exactly.
Yeah.
So honestly, I would say if I didn't have Bitcoin, I'd be stressing out about money all the time. And the likelihood of my wife and I being able to spend the energy on building a healthy relationship and a healthy environment for our son would be a lot lower. And so without Bitcoin, like, I don't know if my marriage would last. I don't know if my ability to raise a decent quality human being would be there, because now I'm not arguing about money, because I know that my value is I'm saving money. The first time in my 27 years, I'm saving money, and I'm not stressing out about whether or not I can pay the bills, because I work my ass off. I have 3 jobs, including this podcast. Like, it's not easy, but at least my value and my time spent is going somewhere that I can maintain. And because of that, I have more energy to dedicate to being a present father, to being a present husband. My wife has more time to dedicate to being a good mother, and we can raise a child in a healthy environment. And if you think about the implications of that, is like, what does that mean for an entire generation of kids who are able to be raised in a healthy environment?
Exactly. It's a real life compounding effect. Like, we talk about compound interest, but it starts with you, and it's going to go to him and hopefully his sons as well. Like, it, I can't even imagine a world if we didn't have hope with this. So
100%, man.
yeah,
100%. Well, dude, Nico, this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of anticipation for this episode. I wanted to talk to you so bad for the last few months. And, this is why. Because not only did we talk about Bitcoin mining, we talked about life, and we talked about philosophy, and we talked about all these things that kind of compound into this ecosystem of Bitcoin and project forward this beautiful thing that we have here. And so you were an amazing guest today. I'd love to have you on in the future. We could talk about the profitability of your system, maybe some other things that you've done with immersion. We could even just talk about your mining at the time. But this was incredible. I really appreciate you being here today, man.
thanks so much, Trevor. This has been awesome. I'm really new to the podcasting scene, and you've made everything, like, I've been so comfortable. This has been a great talk. I'd love to be back on anytime. Talk about anything. And
Awesome.
yeah, dude,
Well,
thanks so much for giving me the platform.
Yeah, I want to give you a couple of minutes or seconds or however you want to take it. Just, tell the people where they can find you if they'd like to get in contact with you. If that's something you'd like. If not, if you want to stay off air and not talk to anybody, that's fine too. But just tell us where they could find you if that's what you want.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd really encourage everybody to check out the link to the GitHub in the description, just if you want to read what goes into a system like this. And as far as social media, I'm really not. I'm bad at it. I don't have the mental energy for it. So this might be the most you get out of me. Just the GitHub link. I do have a Twitter. It's Warm Bitcoin, WARM Bitcoin. But again, I don't post. I don't do anything with it really. Just kind of interact with other pleb miners and stuff like that. So
yeah. So what I'll say is, if you guys want to get in contact with Nico, you want to talk to him, reach out to me. You guys have my email, you have my Telegram, you've got my Twitter. You can reach out to me, and I will send a message to Nico and see if that's something that he's down to do. And if he's down to do it, I will get you guys in contact with each other. How's that?
Yep. That sounds good to me.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, guys, this has been episode 31 of the Buildamine podcast. We're 31 episodes into this journey of learning how Bitcoin mining works, why we need it, why we do it. And it's been an incredible journey. So if you guys liked this episode, please like it, comment on it, give me some feedback. Feedback is what helps me kind of iterate this process and make it better. If you guys are watching on Fountain, please give me a boost. But yeah, I think we can call it there, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Trevor.
All right. Thank you so much, Nico. You guys have a great day. Peace out.
See you.